Thank you very much for joining us for our press briefing with regard to the state's response to the pandemic. And as always, we want to remind people, please continue to use all the tools that we've given you to be able to slow the spread of the virus, even though we are making great progress with regard to the vaccines, and we have seen our hospitalizations continue to decline. We want to remind people that if you keep that 6 foot of distance between you and other people when you're out in public, wear a mask when you go to the store, wash your hands often, and again, key is if you've got that, any of those symptoms like fever, cough, lost your sense of taste and smell, please stay home. We don't want you spreading the virus. Take advantage of testnebraska.com. We've tested over 705,000 people through testnebraska.com, or rather returned 705,000 test results. But that's a great way to be able to go out and make sure you don't have the virus so that you don't spread it to somebody else. So please keep following that. Avoid the 3 C's, those close contacts, confined spaces, crowded places. Those are the things that are going to help the virus spread. So we want to continue to focus on those good practices while we get people vaccinated. And then, of course, all of this is around making sure that we preserve our hospital capacity. We're down to 131 hospitalizations, which is really the point where we were at the end of July, beginning of August time frame. So that's good news. Our hospital capacity is 35% hospital beds, 41% ICU beds, and 77% ventilators being available. So all great news along those lines. And then with regard to vaccines, we have delivered over 552,000 vaccines administered. That puts us about 18th as far as percent of population, according to the New York Times, with 1 dose at 20%. 13th in percent population vaccinated with 2 doses at 11%, and number 25 as far as the overall percent used. And one of the stats that we just found out about yesterday, there's a group called the American Commitment, and Phil Kerpen did a study of all the states and the percentage of 65 years and older folks that they had vaccinated. And according to his calculations, and we'll actually post all this, Nebraska is number 1 as far as the percent of population over 65 that has been vaccinated. So that's what we've obviously been focusing on, because the folks who are 65 years and older are the ones who are the greatest at risk. 83% of our deaths in 2020 came in that category. So that's why we've been focusing on the folks who are 65 years and older. Now, as we work through phase 1B, which is that category of age 65 years and older, and start looking over the next several weeks, health districts will start moving into phase 2A. We want to remind people, please sign up at vaccinate.nebraska or vaccinate.ne.gov. So vaccinate.ne.gov, or you can, if you don't have a computer, you can call toll free 1-833-998-2275. 833-998-2275. We're going to be getting into those 50 to 64-year-olds. So that next age category down. So if you're in that category 50 to 64, now is a great time to sign up through vaccinate.nebraska.com. Please, or vaccinate.ne.gov. I'll get it right eventually. But anyway, go get signed up to get vaccinated, because that's going to be important. When your turn comes up, we'll notify you and you can schedule an appointment. And again, we want to have the same sort of success in that 50 to 64-year-old that we've had with the 65-year-old and plus. Also, had some great news before we get into the rest of our program here today. U.S. News & World Report came out with their best states, and Nebraska ranked the highest we have in the last several years at number 6. We did very well in categories like number 6 overall, but number 9 for education, number 6 in infrastructure, number 10 in opportunity, number 3 in power grid, and number 3 for mental health. So again, great news there, reflecting what we all know, that Nebraska is a great place to live, and that U.S. News & World Report just validates that. All right, so getting into our program today, we've got several guests that are going to be joining us. I'm very excited that if you can see on the screen, we've got, oh, we lost him. Technical difficulties. Was that you on our end or their end? Not sure. All right. Well, I'm going to have to just keep tap dancing here, huh? So anyway, we're very pleased to be joined by the BD, hopefully joined by the BD CEO, Tom Poland. And just a few words about BD here in Nebraska. BD has been in Nebraska really since World War II. And in recent years, since 2016, they've invested over $500 million in our state. They create about 3,500 jobs. And they have 4 locations, 2 in Columbus, 1 in Broken Bow, 1 in Holdridge. And so they've been a great partner for our state for a number of decades and have really helped contribute to the great quality of life we have here in our state. They make very important products that help us take care of our health. One of those products, the syringes and needles, have been used in helping people get vaccinated. So as we go through this process of getting people vaccinated, BD has played a critical role, and the state of Nebraska has hosted that BD, those BD factories that are creating those needles and syringes that are helping do it, get people that vaccine. And so we're very excited to have Tom Poland hopefully on here. I saw him there for a second ago. And they've invested about $70 million in expanding that capacity here in the state. And so with that, all right, Ryan, are we ready? Have I tap danced long enough to get Tom on here to talk a little bit about the work BD's been doing in our state?
We're going to try audio only.
We're going to try audio only, okay. All right, Tom, you're on. Can you hear us? Well, I know Tom is traveling in California today, so maybe California Wi-Fi is not quite as good as it is here in Nebraska.
Let me go ahead and move along and we'll see if we can get another,
All right.
another option.
We might be able to get him on by phone. All right, well, in the meantime, so just so you know, we do have backups for this kind of stuff. We actually are also being joined by a couple of plant managers, Heath Peterson and Stuart Rogers, who have been on the ground to be able to actually deliver on the promise to get these needles out. And so we're very excited to have them here. And I'm gonna ask them to come up here in just a moment. I am going to sign a proclamation, or not a proclamation, rather, I'm going to make both of them admirals in the great Navy of the state of Nebraska. Now, Stuart, I'm guessing you didn't even know we had a Navy, did you? No, he did not. Now, I'm going to spare you all. I'm not going to read the admiralship itself, but I am going to present it. We're going to start actually with Heath first, though. So give me just a moment to get all this signed. So Heath, we're going to start with you. Please come up and accept this admiralship on behalf of the state of Nebraska for all the great work that Vaccination is doing.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. All right. Thank you, Heath. Appreciate it. And Stuart, I don't know what they did, but they didn't give me the paper clip to hold yours together. Just so you know, we have to be a little bit more careful with this one. And now, Stuart, you are an admiral in the great Navy of the state of Nebraska. Please come up and accept your admiralship.
Thank you very much.
All right, I give that to you as well. Great. Thanks, both of you, for all your work. And please pass on to your teammates how much we appreciate all the work they're doing to help us recover from this pandemic by getting those needles produced. All right, so while we're working on getting Tom back, we're going to go ahead on to our next part of the program, which is talking about the VRAS system, or the system that the state is creating to be able to help not only get people signed up through vaccinate.ne.gov, but also will be used for scheduling and inventory management and so forth. Lori Snyder is here from our Department of Health and Human Services. Lori is our Chief Information Officer, and so she is going to walk through some of what we got going with regard to VRAS. This is a program we're already starting to roll out with some of our local health departments right now, and we hope to really have this all pulled together by the end of the month. So, Lori, will you please come up and talk to us a little about our software program?
All right, thanks, Governor, for this opportunity, and for all of you who are listening. I just want to give you a little bit of update of where we are and then talk about some things that you will be seeing here shortly. So as you know, I came out and talked to everybody about a month ago about the registration system, and the governor talked about it, vaccinate.ne.gov. We have about 250,000 vaccinations so far, and that's great. But we also want to be sure that we don't miss anyone. So if you are over 65 in particular, please register. And even if you're not over 65, please register. We're trying to get everyone in the system and make sure we don't miss folks. I know this is one of the great things that I feel about the state of Nebraska. You know, I'm a lifelong resident, and I always think we're strong, we're resilient, and above all, we always help each other out. And this is such a super way to help each other out. If you have already registered, great, because then you've either received your vaccine or you'll get it. If you haven't registered, this is your opportunity to help. You can help your neighbor, you can help your friend, you can help your relative by getting vaccinated. So for anyone who hasn't yet registered or who hasn't thought about it, please let's continue that great tradition that we have in the state of Nebraska of really being there for each other, and let's get this virus thing behind us. So a couple other things since I talked to you last. We did launch the Spanish site, and so you will still go to the same site, vaccinate.ne.gov, but in the upper right, you will see an English, and you can click on that upper right of the site, and you can toggle that to Spanish. So if you need to register in Spanish, you just go to that upper right, select Spanish, and the entire site will be converted to Spanish for you so that you can register that way. If you have other language needs, at the end of the briefing, I'll again be posting the call number that you can go to the call center site, and they can help you with additional languages as well, okay? But I know we have a large Spanish-speaking population, and we wanted to get that out. We delivered that on 2/15 as planned, so many of you have already used it. But if you weren't aware and you need that, then please go ahead and do that. As we continue transitioning, last time I talked about transitioning registrations. What we're doing right now is transitioning scheduling. So as we transition scheduling, we're moving more and more of those registration data back into the state system. We have been sharing the state registrations with the local public health departments, and they have been sharing their registrations with the state. So don't be worried that we were losing any registrations. We're absolutely not. But in the course of this transaction or this transition, you may get an extra email or two. So just, use your situation as direction for what to do. If you get a registration confirmation and you've already been vaccinated or you've already registered, that's fine. That just tells you that the data moved, from one system to another. If you get an email saying to register, asking you to register, and you've already been vaccinated, then don't worry about that. Some of this data takes a little bit of time to flow through the systems, and you can just ignore the email in that case. But the system is really great about reaching out to you through email. And again, we talked about if you don't have an email, the state will be getting those emails on your behalf as long as you entered their email address, and so you won't be left out. But it really is a good way to communicate. You don't have to be, just watching the news every single day to know what's going on. Not that that's not a bad idea. You definitely want to do that. But personally, you will get contacted, and I think that's an important advantage to this system. So just making you aware that some of those emails are going to start flowing in. I'm ready to flip to the next slide. Thank you. So we are starting to do a lot more scheduling through the system. So we have 4 of our local public health departments that you will see registrations for scheduling for appointments come out, and more of them coming here in the next couple of weeks. Remember, we don't want Nebraska to be a lottery system. We are all about being fair and equitable, so we don't want folks having to go from one website to another to try to get registered. We also don't want the experience of you having to drive around and stand in line. So again, just reminding you how this works. What will happen is, as your information is in the state registration system, you will be selected in the order that the state has set the priorities. So that standard prioritization list that the governor and Angie Ling has talked to you about, people will be selected in that order. Those selections will be grouped by local public health department. So wherever your local public health department is in their execution within the phase that we're in, those are the people who will be selected. And what we will do is we will send out approximately the same number of invitations as we have vaccine for. Now, we know some people may, not be feeling well. They may have just had a different kind of vaccine. There may be some other reasons why they can't get that. So we may send just a few more than what we have schedules for. But the idea is not to have you have to pick a schedule way, way far out in the future. It's to have you have a schedule and know that there's vaccine available when you get this email. So again, you will start getting these emails, and a little later in the briefing, I'm going to show you what a couple of those look like so that you'll recognize them. And I'll also talk about the address they come from, because we know that sometimes folks have things that filter out to their junk mail. So we want to be sure that you're looking for that and you know what to look for. So we'll talk about that. Again, many of you are concerned, as you should be, about security. And so we want you to know that when you get the email, that appointment is unique for you, that scheduling is secure, and the data all along the way will be encrypted. So these aren't random emails that you can share with your family and friends. This one is specific for you when it comes to you. And the good news is you will know that you've got a vaccine dose waiting for you when you get to that registration site when you do these. There's a second way that we're sending out invitations. So this first way I talked about would be kind of, general people that aren't in one of our priority groups. So the first way would be more if you're just over 65, that those type of emails would come to you. Or as we move to the lower priority groups, we'll be sending emails out to just general population type folks. The second way that emails will come out and you'll get invited is what we call a closed pod. Every time I talk, I always want to give you some new thing to use for a good word. Closed pod is the new word for today. These folks, this is what we'll use for our priority groups. So let's say you're a bunch of educators from one of the Sarpy County high schools, and we're actually doing that this weekend. We've got some educators from one of the Sarpy County high schools. They will be getting an invitation that will be specifically for them. And so in this case, you won't necessarily choose your location because we actually set this clinic up specifically for you. So you will go in. If you haven't already registered, it will take you to vaccinate.ne.gov to register, and then it will immediately take you to a scheduling screen where you can pick the time that's most convenient for you out of the time that this clinic is offered. So, if the clinic's offered all day, you'll have several options. If the clinic's just offered for a short period, you'll have those options. So in either case, you'll be able to register right there. There's a link in your email. It will take you right there. Let's say you register and you need to reschedule. When you get your confirmation email back, and again, I'll show you that, on your confirmation email, it's going to show you all of the details, but you also will have a link there that you can either reschedule or cancel. So it's very much in your hands, and you can do what you need to do. Go ahead and go next slide, please. So just to remind everybody of the flow, how this works, first of all, you need to register at vaccinate.ne.gov, and if you're already registered, that's great. You don't need to do it twice. When it's your turn, you will get an email that says, go ahead and schedule your appointment. And when you do that, the first thing you're going to do is select your location, and that location will be in your local public health department area. And then you'll select your date and time from the registration screen, and then you'll get that confirmation email sent to you with the QR code. Then bring that QR code with you to your appointment. So it's pretty simple, and the system walks you through it. Go ahead. So the next screen that I want to show you is what that invitation to schedule looks like. So you can see it's going to arrive from dhhs.do-not-reply@nebraska.gov. And we've got that here, and I'm sure people will post that information for you so that you can go and check your junk mail in case you don't see that come in for you. And then basically it just says hello and your name and you're eligible, and then click here for this appointment. And then it gives you a registration ID. You don't have to remember that. The system will take care of that for you, okay? The next slide. And then here's what a confirmation email looks like. Now, this confirmation email, you can see it has the QR code at the top. If you're not familiar with that, that's that little boxy picture there. They will be able to use that at the clinic to check you in. And here you can see in the next lines down are the links to change or cancel your appointment. And at the bottom, you can see all the details of your appointment. So it tells you where to go, the address, your appointment date, and your appointment time. So try to bring that with you to your appointment if you have it. If you forget, or if you don't have the technology, don't worry. They can look you up in the system and there's no issues. They'll just ask you for your name and your date of birth, and they'll be able to find you and check you in with that. So don't panic. If you're halfway there and you forget your email, you'll be fine, okay? So just a last couple of things. I'm ready for the next one. Thank you. Perfect. Just a couple of last things to remember, just to make sure that we're, again, being the good Nebraskans that we are and helping everyone, including those who maybe don't have all of the economic or technology advantages as our neighbors. If you have low or no technology, remember, if you want to use a friend or a relative's email address to register, please do that. They will get the email confirmations and help you schedule your appointments. And if you need to use the vaccine call center, then the call center will get your invitations and they will send them to, they'll either contact you directly or they'll send them to the local public health departments to contact you. And at the bottom of the screen here, I've got another reminder of the vaccinate.ne.gov URL. And remember that don't put the www in front of that, okay? We don't do that, just these things right here. And then I also have a reminder for the call center number. So that's what I have, and really looking forward to getting everyone in the state vaccinated. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lori. All right. Well, I think that's good timing. I'm hoping that's good timing, because it looks like Ryan is switching over the computer so we can bring Tom Poland back. Is that accurate, Ryan? All right, great. So just bear with us for a moment. Actually, while we're waiting for Tom to come back up, one of the things I want to emphasize is asking people to get registered at vaccinate.ne.gov. We just had a case with a skilled nursing facility here in the state. They had not had an outbreak at that facility prior to January. They got people vaccinated, more than 90% of the residents and 75% of the staff. And then they had an outbreak. Now, what happened is of the staff, 40% of the unvaccinated staff came down with the virus, but not one of the vaccinated staff came down with the virus. So folks, we have a real life example from the state of Nebraska where we can demonstrate that when you get the vaccine, it is going to prevent you from getting the virus. We had that with the staff at this long-term care facility, this skilled nursing facility. So very good news there, a real world example of how a group that got vaccinated, a group that didn't get vaccinated, the folks that didn't get vaccinated, 40% came down with the virus. The group that did get vaccinated, not one person. So again, we want to continue to recognize that this vaccine is safe and effective, and that if you get it, it's going to help make sure that you don't end up in the hospital or having those severe consequences up until the point of even dying. So please sign up at vaccinate.ne.gov. And I believe we have Tom Poland back now. Is that right? All right, Tom, welcome back. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Governor. Governor Ricketts, obviously, thank you very much for the invitation here, and just obviously a huge thank you to the state of Nebraska for just an extremely close partnership, not only throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, but for the last many, many decades as we've continued to expand our presence there. As many folks may know, BD is the world's largest manufacturer of needles and syringes, many of which are produced there in Nebraska, where we've had operations for over 70 years. We're extremely proud, and I personally am extremely proud of the over 3,500 associates that we have there in Nebraska who are playing just a critical role in the fight against COVID-19 and helping to restore hope and health, not only there in Nebraska, but around the country and around the world as we meet the healthcare needs of society. From the start of the pandemic, we've been working around the clock, educating and discussing needs with governments around the world, running our manufacturing operations there in Nebraska 24/7, whether or not it's making products that are used to treat patients in the ICU. Fact is that 90% of any patient going into a US hospital, 90% of patients going in a hospital will be touched by a BD device. And many of those devices are made there in Nebraska. our syringes, our flush products. It could be our catheters, IV sets. Those are the products. Blood collection tubes that are made there in Broken Bow just have a tremendous impact on treating patients with COVID. And of course, today, we've committed to make an additional 1 billion syringes. Not many companies can say they're making an extra billion of anything. And we normally make 7 billion syringes a year. We're going to make an extra billion this year to specifically deliver the COVID vaccine. Over 300 million of those are going to be used here in the US to deliver the COVID vaccine to citizens around. We're delivering all 300 million of those by this spring. And we continue to work with the government to assess what additional supply is needed. And we're committed to make sure that the US has what they need to deliver the campaign as vaccines continue to become increasingly available. Just a little fact, that means that extra billion, that's us making 33 extra syringes every second, or about 2,000 extra syringes a minute, which is, it's a pretty high technology automation that's there in Nebraska that's making that and enabling that campaign to roll out to benefit the country and get us back to a new normal. We continue because of just a great partnership with the state and Governor Ricketts and his team, as well as just the outstanding talent that's there in Nebraska. We continue to make big investments there. So this past July, we announced a $70 million public-private partnership with the US government to expand our injection manufacturing there in Nebraska. We're expanding our Holdridge operation, specifically is where that capacity is going. And when that capacity comes online this summer, the US government has first rights to any of the syringes coming off of those lines to be used in the vaccination campaign as part of our partnership. Also, this past December, we announced a $1.2 billion investment over 4 years to expand production capacity there in Columbus, Nebraska, as well as in other parts of the world for our pre-filled syringes. So this is as vaccines move from vials into pre-filled devices, we're going to be making those devices right there in Nebraska as well to help make it easier to deliver vaccines, not just this year, but potentially future vaccines to help cover variants, et cetera. And as I mentioned before, we're playing a big role in diagnosing COVID. We were one of the first companies to have developed molecular tests for COVID, and we're helping states around the country do testing there. And we were one of the first 2 companies to have a rapid 15-minute point of care test, which we're being used now across long-term care facilities and nursing homes, schools, physician offices, retail clinics to help diagnose patients or make sure that locations are safe with a 15-minute test that's really easy to use. And so, again, a lot of partnerships that are enabling those are based there in Nebraska. Again, Governor Ricketts, we really appreciate the partnership that allowed us to remain open and continue to service the world and our associates service the world's healthcare needs throughout this pandemic period. And obviously, we look forward to continuing that partnership for another 70 years plus as we look ahead.
Great. Well, hey, thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much for joining us by Zoom today. And we appreciate, so much of what BD is doing here. Obviously, the over 3,500 jobs that you've created here, the investment in our state, but certainly during this pandemic, the needles and syringes you're producing to help people get the vaccine so that we can get through this pandemic, and all the other healthcare products you produce to take care of us when we need that. So thank you very much for all of that. So what we'll do now is we're going to go ahead and move into questions and answers, and we're going to focus just on questions and answers specifically about BD, because Mr. Poland here has, as you might imagine, of a CEO of a global company that's helping save the world here from the pandemic. He's very busy. So we're going to focus on any questions we may have from media on this. So Taylor, do we have any questions that were sent in for Tom Poland or any of the plant managers that are here? Heath Peterson and Stuart Rogers.
We may have one from Julie Anderson, but I haven't got it yet. I'm asking her for it. So if you wanted to just stall for a moment.
Okay, so Tom, once again, I'm going to tap dance here for just a minute, okay? We do have a couple of other questions that were sent in ahead of time. Brent Bonfleur from KLKN said, if it's not too late, why would Nebraska follow today's guidance from the CDC but not their guidance when it comes to vaccinating people with underlying health conditions? Well, with regard to the CDC guidance on the masking and not, you can gather with people indoors without a mask if you, both people have been vaccinated or small family groups, if one party's been vaccinated and so forth. We actually at the state didn't have any rules around that. So while we certainly always take a look at CDC guidance as we put together our plan here at the state of Nebraska, we do it in a very Nebraska-specific way. So I think what the CDC put out there with regard to that is a step in the right direction. When it comes to the guidance with regard to isolating or quarantining, rather, if you've been exposed, we actually had already put that guidance in place in our directed health measures so that if you had been vaccinated, you didn't have to quarantine if you got exposed. So we were actually ahead of the game, with regard to the CDC on that factor. And then with regard to treating underlying conditions, again, we came up with a plan that was right for Nebraska based upon our data about who was most at risk. That focused on those folks that were 65 years and older. And we are moving into that category where we'll be doing underlying health conditions when we hit that 50 to 64. And we've talked about how that will be something that the health departments work with local providers to be able to make that happen. So we do it, but we just do it in a way that is right for Nebraska.
We do have a couple of questions that have come in.
All right, great. So we do have questions for Tom Pullen.
So Julie Anderson asks, are the syringes BD is adding the low dead space ones that get more doses from vials?
So Julie Anderson of the Omaha World Herald is asking, the syringes you make, Tom, are they the ones that don't have that dead space so that you can get, for example, 6 doses of Pfizer out of that vial and maybe 11 of Moderna out of the vial? Are those the ones you're making, or is that a standard type, just a syringe in general?
Well, we do make both, and we are supplying tens of millions of those low-dose syringes to the U.S. government, but we're also providing standard syringes. So we do have the capabilities to make both, and we're actively working with the U.S. government to understand really the long-term interests in low-dose syringes. Normally, there's not much demand at all for low-dose syringes on an ongoing basis. And so that's a phenomenon that was really just understood recently with the vaccine shortage. And so where that goes long-term, again, is something we're in very collaborative discussions with the U.S. And as we continue to expand capacity, we're working to understand what type of capacity should we make it for our low-dose syringes or our standard syringes. And but we are supplying low-dose syringes to the government.
All right, great. Thank you.
Bailey Bischoff from 1011 says she has a question. She'd like to know the plant manager perspective. What is it like to be on the front lines of making vaccinations happen?
All right, Bailey Bischoff would like to know from one of the plant managers, what's it like on the front lines of making the syringes and allowing these vaccinations to happen? So either Heath or Stewart, one of you got to come up here.
I can talk to that.
Well, you got to come up here, though.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you come up here, you can take off your mask while you're here at the podium. And Stuart Rogers, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, good morning. I think it's been a challenge, certainly the last 12 months. I was reflecting that this is about 12 months ago that we actually really went into the more serious stage of the pandemic. And it's been a very, very challenging period of time. What I would say is our associates have really risen to that challenge. There was a lot of fear 12 months ago, a lot of uncertainty, and we really didn't know how people were going to react, and we had to, if you like, learn on the run how we were going to address this situation. What I would say is I'm personally extremely proud, and I'm honored to stand here today and represent the associates of Holdridge and the rest of the BD associates across Nebraska, because they've really risen to that challenge. They've followed the protocols. We put in a lot of different protocols to make sure we kept our associates safe. They've even though it's become tiresome for us all, they've continued to practice those protocols, and we've managed to keep our associates. In the most part, we've had a few minor issues, but mostly we've had very, very successful at keeping our associates safe in the workplace. And alongside that, we've also implemented 2 new vaccine syringe lines in Holdridge, and we are actually started production on one of those lines at the end of January, and the second line for the syringes is starting up, is going through validation now. So we are currently making in the order of 400,000 vaccine syringes out of our first blister line through the BARDA contract. And we are now also have a number of machines coming in the next 5 weeks that are going to enable us to implement the needle, the Eclipse needle, which will accompany the vaccine. So we've still got a big push on for the remainder of this calendar year. We do expect to be in production there in August. But that doesn't come without a huge amount of effort from at this point, the engineering team and the operations teams, but also the support from the associates on the floor who really do make it happen. So very proud. It's been a huge challenge, a huge adventure, but I think it really shows what people can achieve when we stand up to those challenges together as a team.
Stuart, Bailey wants to know which facility you're with.
So I'm at the Holdridge facility.
And we have a couple more questions for Tom.
Thank you, Stuart. And Stuart, you might have guessed from his accent, is actually not from Nebraska, but from Plymouth in the southwest of the UK. So thank you, Stuart. You've been here about 3 years, right? Yeah, 3 years, great. We've got a couple more questions for you, Tom.
Julian wants to know how many more people have they hired in Nebraska?
So Julie wants to know Julie Anderson of the World Herald wants to know how many more people have been hired in Nebraska to be able to produce these additional syringes?
So I'm not sure of that answer myself. I don't know if Heath and Stuart are aware. It's certainly been a number of new jobs created.
Yeah, so Tom doesn't know, but Heath, can you come up and address that? So Heath Peterson, who is with the Broken Bow facility of BD.
Morning, everyone. Yeah, so the question is really around how many people have we added to help support the pandemic situation. Roughly across the state, it's approximately 200 to 250 associates that we've added as quickly as we can to try to make sure that we have capacity and sustainability to meet our demands for the pandemic syringes. All right.
Thank you. And that's on top of about the 3,500 associates we have in the state to start.
How is it possible to make an extra 1 billion syringes?
So Tom, Bailey Bishop wants to know, how is it possible to make an extra 1 billion syringes?
How's it possible? with amazing associates there, clearly. If you were to go in and see our manufacturing plants, there are facilities in the world. So we are a very large net exporter from the US, not only of syringes, but other products. And that's because of this very high-end automation. So the jobs that we have there in Nebraska, they're quite technical because they're dealing with advanced robotics and automation. And if you see the lines, it literally is a blur. As I mentioned, 1 billion syringes is making an extra 33 per second. And so you can imagine the speed that we're making. I remember coming into some of the plants there in Nebraska, and they just installed a robot on the presses. We're pressing resins and molding components that are going down conveyor lines where they're being assembled and packaged, all integrated. Pellets to final product is all integrated. And the new robot was being put in because when the press opened, gravity was too slow for our manufacturing lines. We had to actually get a robot to go faster than gravity to grab the components out and move them down the line. That's just how they're thinking through the speed in which we're producing to be able to make that number of products. And again, that's an extra 1 billion on top of the 7 billion we make. Just as another fact, we make about 50 billion medical devices a year as a company. We always joke that, and this is a true fact, put that in perspective, Lego makes about 24 billion different Lego pieces. So we make about twice as many medical devices as Lego does Lego bricks. That's pretty big scale.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. That's pretty amazing. And I've been in location, Columbus, Holdridge, and Broken Bow, and it is a pretty amazing operation. Just to emphasize what Tom said, that these are great jobs, right? The facilities are absolutely modern. They're leveraging technology. They're very technical jobs. They're great paying jobs. And that's, so we really appreciate what BD is doing for the people in Nebraska by providing these, those associates those jobs.
And then Bailey's last question on this topic is, when they send the syringes to the government, where do they go?
So Bailey's last question is, when you send the syringes to the government, where do they go?
Go to extremely large warehouses. And obviously, that's 1 billion takes up a lot of space. We send them to the federal government and whoever they allocate us to send them to. Sometimes they go to packagers who are putting them in kits along with the vaccines and other materials needed at the vaccination sites, and then they distribute them from there. So we're sending them to a central location, and then the government allocates them across the country as required.
All right, great. Do we have any other questions for Tom Poland? All right, Tom, those are the end of the questions for you. Thank you again so much for joining us here today. We very much appreciate it. Hope you have safe travels. And again, we're grateful for your investment here in the state of Nebraska and all that BD is doing to help our country and indeed the entire world get through this pandemic.
Thank you, Governor Ricketts, and thank you to all of our associates there in Nebraska for everything you're doing.
Great, thanks.
Take care. Be well.
All right, so now we do have some other questions we'll get into on other topics. Fred Knapp, NET, do you support Senator Geist's legislation regarding takeout alcohol? Do you specifically support the provisions regarding the excise tax and purchasing alcohol by the drink? So the answer is yes. Absolutely support what Senator Geist is doing with regard to making that takeout alcohol permanent all year round, or even after we get through the pandemic. I think that, one, certainly this pandemic has demonstrated on this and many other cases that a lot of the regulations we had in place were not necessary, that they weren't providing any sort of public benefit, and they were just creating red tape. This is an example of one where we can do this in a safe way. And then, of course, with regard to the excise tax, I'm all in favor of lowering taxes. So, yes, if we can lower the excise tax, that would be a good thing as well. But this is one of the things that's going to help our bars and restaurants be able to continue to be successful as we go from this transition of the pandemic to the post-pandemic times. Then Christian Wagner, NTV. I'm curious what Governor Ricketts' take on the Biden executive order regarding the 30/30 plan is, and what he believes it could mean for Nebraska landowners. Well, I think I've commented on this already. I think the 30/30 plan is a terrible idea. Not that conservation's a terrible idea, but proposing to set aside 30% of our land and waters here in the United States with no scientific reasoning for why you picked 30%. Just really doesn't make any sense. And let's take a step back. Who's this going to harm? This is going to harm our farmers and ranchers. Right? Our farmers and ranchers were the original conservationists because they wanted to pass along that family farm or ranch to the next generation. And so they took care of the land and their animals. And that's why we have multiple generations of, you can find in Nebraska many farm and ranch families that are 5th and 6th generations because they took care of that. They know that it's important to take care of the land. And if you go to something where the federal government is going to take more land and put it in under the federal government's care, that means that they're not going to pay property taxes, which means you're going to further burden rural communities with paying for things like schools and roads and things like that. Not to mention some of the other consequences that they have, already, we were on our way as a country to be energy independent. We'd start shipping out energy for the first time in I don't know how long, and now the Biden administration has put a pause on that drilling on federal lands, which means that that's going to harm our ability to produce our own energy. Again, we would rather sell energy to our friends than buy it from our enemies. So these types of policies are misguided.
We have a question from Paul Hamill. Why does Hy-Vee and Walmart online sign up have a box to check for critical workers, including educators, but our state website doesn't?
So the question is, why does Walmart and Hy-Vee have a box on their sign up for a box to check for critical workers when our own state website does not? Again, let's go back to the federal government started the federal pharmacy program without really talking to us. And so pharmacies were really left on their own to create their own, registration systems, which is what these pharmacies have done. Ultimately, with the program that Lori just talked about today, VRAS, we will be pulling all of that into the state site. So when we get our state system up and running, not only will you do the sign up through vaccinate.ne.gov, but that's how we will do the scheduling, which is what Paul's talking about there, and then also inventory management. So ultimately, we're going to bring in all of our local health departments and all these pharmacies into a unified system so you don't see discrepancies like Paul's describing.
Julie Anderson wants to know if we've heard anything about next week's vaccine supply.
And Julie Anderson wants to know if we've heard anything about next week's vaccine supply. The only new news I can tell you is, again, The federal government has told us generally we can look 3 weeks out and see if we're going to get the same number of vaccines. The only thing that is different is that yesterday on a White House call, the federal government did say that they were going to provide about 400,000 Johnson & Johnson vaccines to the states, tribes, and territories. Now, that will be spread out amongst all those. So Nebraska's share will obviously be much smaller, but we will get some share of the vaccines probably next week. We may be able to order them this week. So, the federal government previously been saying that it would be the end of March before we start to see some Johnson & Johnson. We may see a little bit of Johnson & Johnson next week, but again, a relatively small amount.
Sarah from KTV says they learned that the Walmart at 72nd in Omaha is now giving out vaccines. However, they weren't part of the original federal retail pharmacy list, and it sounds like more Walmarts and Sam's Clubs may also be getting them. Do we have any ideas on how many pharmacies in the state are now part of the federal retail program? She said she thought the original number was 33, and do we by chance have an updated list?
So Sarah, I'm sorry, where's Sarah with again?
KTV.
KETV said that the Walmart on 72nd and Pacific, was that the?
She didn't specify. I assume so, yeah.
Well, wherever the Walmart is on 72nd Street, is doing vaccines. We are working with additional, pharmacies to be able to provide vaccines that were, the expansion of the federal pharmacy program. The original federal pharmacy program, the federal government picked 43 spots, 43 pharmacies, and I don't have a number offhand how many pharmacies we have, but we can get that for you, and Taylor, can you just follow up? I don't know that number right off the top of my head.
I don't know, this may be something Lori knows. Is there a place where people can go to see who's in the federal pharmacy program?
And is there a place where people can go to see who's all in the federal pharmacy program? Lori, do you know that answer? Yeah. She does. Okay, hold on just a moment. We're going to have Lori Snyder come back up, our CIO.
Yes, and so just a couple things to add on that first part. There is a website out there, VSafe, that you can go out and you can look at and find which federal pharmacy programs or federal pharmacies are in the program, and we can publish that information as well. But the other thing is VSafe. It's VSafe, and I'm going to have to get you the exact address, but it's because it's probably longer than just that word, VSafe. But we'll get that. But the other thing is, we did start with 17 Walmarts, and they did have additional ones sign up, and they do sign up, like the governor said, directly with the feds. So as we get those, we will be adding those. And I don't think that the state is publishing where those are, but that federal system will show who has vaccine there. When we get into, and we're transitioning, so the Hy-Vees and the Walmarts and all of those, they're transitioning into the state system over the course of this month and should be in sometime in the latter half of this month. And so anyone who's registered with those different things, on there that they can check off, or in these different systems, they will all be coming through the state system here very shortly. And so this is just a temporary thing because the feds rolled this program out so quickly. So does that help?
This question might be for you, Lori, as well, from Bailey at 1011. How many people have registered for the vaccine with the state?
So Bailey from Channel 1011 asked how many people had registered with the state. The last I checked yesterday, it was just over 250,000 had registered with the state.
And her next question is for you as well. What counties will start scheduling with the state? I believe that you had said there were 4. I think she might be in public health.
So Bailey asked which counties had started the scheduling, and we'll translate that from county to local public health districts. So the ones that are kind of front runners right now, we have Central District, which is in the Grand Island area. We have Two Rivers, which is in the Kearney area, Sarpy, Cass, the Bellevue area. And then we have a number of them, Dakota County, Elkhorn, Logan Valley, that are just fast followers behind that. And South Heartland is also. So I mentioned 4 because 4 have things scheduled. Those other 3 will probably have things scheduled by the end of the day.
And then this is our last question. Are there any benefits to the state taking overall registrations versus local health departments?
The advantage to doing it in the state is that all of that data is there when you come in to do your vaccination. So if you come into a vaccination clinic and you've registered with the local public health departments, many of them do not capture all of the right data, and we slow your entry process through, walking through the line down just a little bit to get that data entered. If you have already registered with the state, then it's very simple to look you up, and we don't have to have you sit and write down your name and address and email address and phone number again. So while that may sound very simple, it does take about 2 minutes. And if you don't write that down, those 2 minutes go away, and you literally can be in and out of a clinic in like 17 to 20 minutes. That means the 15-minute waiting period after you've had the vaccine, and only 2 to 5 minutes to walk through the line. Now, not every clinic is like that, and I don't want to say that they're all going to be exactly that fast, but we have seen that we've achieved those kind of timeframes when people have registered ahead of time. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Lori. All right, so you have no more questions, is that right, Taylor? All right, great. Well, again, folks, thank you very much. I want to thank Tom Pullen, the CEO of BD. I want to thank Heath Peterson and Stuart Rogers for being here from the Broken Bow and Holdridge facilities. We really appreciate all the great work BD is doing in our state and the investment, the jobs created, and of course, helping us get through this pandemic with all those needles. So thank you, and the needles and syringes. So thank you very much. And Lori, thank you for being here to help talk about the state system. Francis, thank you very much. All right, Taylor, so we are scheduled again 10 a.m. Monday here, is that right?
We'll have to go on Monday, but the details will be announced later this week.
All right, so stay tuned for the details with regard to the press briefing on Monday. And I hope that everybody else has a great rest of your week. Thank you very much.